Hello and welcome to Fury of Dracula Scot-sword subscription YouTube channel. However, today it's not Scot-sword's voice you're hearing, it's mine, Roscoe. A slight change today. We actually are privileged and honoured to have the two best players who finished first and second in the inaugural Fury of Dracula tournament, Scot-sword and Werecraft. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello both. Hello Werecraft, hi Roscoe.
So yeah, I thought today was quite good. Obviously, the tournament's now done and dusted. I won't say anything for spoilers, but everyone's going to be looking at it anyway. I just wanted to get a kind of view on how you guys both found it. I mean, from the start, pretty much you've both been leading the way from qualifying right through to the very end. It was a two-horse race, pretty much. So my own point of view, it'd be interesting to find out. I mean, certainly the hunter play from both you has been exemplary, and really just we all joke about it's the cards that you get and how lucky you are, but your strategies and how you play as hunters is I think would be of interest to the community as well. So we'll go through a few questions and feel free to answer. You don't have to. It'll be a very short video if you don't. So yeah, I think first of all, I would like to congratulate on behalf of the community and myself and Nomad to both of you. Scot-sword, congratulations on winning the tournament, the inaugural
Thank you
Fury
very
of
much.
Dracula.
Thank you very much.
Werecraft, it was a very close second. I mean, there was very little to split both you, so it could have been one or two. It's almost been if there was a joint first, then I don't think anybody would argue about both of you getting it. But congratulations, Werecraft, on your stellar performance throughout the tournament as well.
Thank you.
Shall I can on the PowerPoint, shall I just show the league table? Just I know you guys can't see it, my Discord thing's not working properly, but if I can maybe show the table just so the viewers at home can see how close it was at the top between the two of us, and also just like how close it was in general, like between third and eighth, there was only basically 2 wins difference. It's pretty ridiculous. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I can't share it with you guys. Maybe go into like the Discord channel, you might be able to find the picture with the latest group finishings. Anyway.
Oh yeah, I've got that one there. Yeah, I saw that. So that's been covered there. So, well, I mean, I guess first of all, Scot-sword again. Sort of congratulations, but I'm not going to go too much into it and blow smoke up the proverbial. But how did you find the tournament as a competitor rather than the organizer? We'll look at it as a player side. How did you find the whole thing?
Yeah, that's quite tricky because I was having to constantly separate those two sides. As a competitor, I mean, maybe a bit cliche, but really competitive. Obviously, the final league, obviously, that's sort of no real surprise there. But even like the group stages, I think it was very interesting, though. I think I might have said it in one of my league videos. One thing I really liked it from a competitor's perspective was the fact that because we had these two stages, and in the first stage it was a group of 7, most of us ended up playing against people who we don't normally play. Yeah, there's sure, like I play against Werecraft quite often and that, but most of the other people in my group I don't play against very often. So it had that really nice opportunity as a competitor to play against people who you're not used to. So you're not playing against the same usual suspects all the time, seeing different strategies, seeing how the different ways of playing. So that was really fun. Even though maybe the games in the first stage, there's going to be that difference in sort of quality between the players, but that's just normal in any sort of tournament. And then when it went to the final stage, all the games were ridiculously close, and even the games where, from my own perspective, I won't speak for Werecraft, but like from my perspective, there were a couple of big hunter victories that I got, which ultimately sort of tipped it in my favor. But then, really, still, like they were closer games. They came down to getting, as you said, the right cards at the right time, or it wasn't like I was beating the Dracula player in the first week. They were really competitive up until the 3rd week, or potentially even the 4th week. But it's just the way the cards just didn't get many influence points for Dracula, so the IDS score looked really big. But then when you actually see the match, there's a lot of thought from a hunter perspective. There's a lot of thought that went in behind it. There's lots of planning. It wasn't just stumble into Dracula day 3 and kill him instantly. It was very, very competitive. So yeah, maybe a little bit cliche as an answer, but that was the thing I was taking from it. I can't think of such a string of games which were played at such high quality. Either games that I was involved with, or then games I was spectating. probably some of the best games I've played ever. Not just from a performance, but just in terms of like epicness and everything. All came in the league. There are a few I can think of, like Werecraft. Like we had one. I think that's before I was recording. We had one. Then Rossco, we've had a few, but so many games that were just really epic from start to finish, and that's a really good advertisement for the game in general. So.
Absolutely. No, I agree completely. Werecraft, from your side, I say you were both pretty much neck and neck all the way through from qualifying. How did you find the tournament?
I really liked it. I'm really glad that we made it happen, and I'm glad that what proved that although hunters do better at higher skill levels, it's not as pronounced. I mean, the difference in hunter wins versus Dracula wins in the final league was like maybe 54, 46 or something like that. I can't remember the exact numbers. But
yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah, that's about in professional chess, the difference between white and black, because white moves first. So the hunters, the thing that makes FOD so great is that it's so asymmetrical. And it's interesting that the hunters are not, in fact, out improving Dracula at the high levels. Or if they are, they're only to a very limited extent.
Yeah, when you see it based upon win, I think that's funny. When you base it on just win rate, then absolutely, it looks very close. But I think maybe when you start taking like scores into account, then yeah, the IDS victories for it's very. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy for this to happen, but it's far more likely that a maximum IDS victory would happen for the hunters and not for Dracula. That'd be very unusual.
Oh, yeah.
If Dracula won with full health, that's very unlikely. Whereas the hunters winning with no influence on the board, that's not unusual to happen, even if it does make it to the third week, towards the end of the third week.
Yeah, that's often how it is because of the mechanics of the game. Yeah, it's very, very difficult for Dracula to survive at full health. You'd have to be going on land all the time. And the way I play, I do use the sea a lot too, because it's just, you have to. I mean, it's so dangerous to go on land, especially to try to go through the narrow east-west passage as Drac.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's right. It shows it's like many of these, if you watch sports events or what have you, and you hear them saying that the scoreline flattered the performance, and that is that. There's some videos you watch, and even if the IDS is relatively high, it's not until you're watching it, and it could just be that one mishap or mistake or one confusion of where someone's gone or whatever, that it looks like it was a whitewash of a game, but then when you watch it, it was very much, wow, there's the two turning points or the one turning point in that game. Had that gone the other way, it would have been a completely different story. So I think that's right, even obviously more so the final stage, because most of us there are sort of the higher end of the more experienced period Dracula players, so the games were even tighter in the qualifying. I think within your group, you probably had a relatively competitive group compared to others. Although there was new people as such, but they were still experienced with the game. How did you find that when it was drawn? Obviously, Scots-word, you'll have kind of seen that first before posting it, but when you first saw your groups, what was your first thoughts on, for the qualifying stage?
You go, Werecraft, folks. I think I've spoken about this on camera, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts first, Werecraft, on this.
I thought that fortunately the groups were reasonably well balanced. I thought that was just a fortunate quirk of the draw. And I'd like to point out, by the way, that the player NB in my group, who is Ukrainian, although his record was in the first stage not the best, the strategy of starting in Italy as Dracula and then moving to Baltica early across the Adriatic was copied from him. I call it the Ukrainian system.
Oh, that's where you got it from.
Like
fascinating.
I'll message him that then, because you'll like to hear that.
Fascinating. I didn't realize that. All right.
Yes, that was the only game I lost as hunters in round one, and I lost it decisively. He was at, I think, 10 HP at the end.
Wow.
And
that's
that
interesting, because NB was a late starter, wasn't he? Because somebody dropped out, so
yeah.
he replaced somebody in your group. So, thank you, NB, for
Yeah,
filling the gap and
definitely.
and were the opponent to Werecraft as well.
That's fascinating.
I
Yeah,
think looking at it as well, when I looked at Group C, it was like, oh, right, there's, because it was more, I think everyone in Group C, the names were familiar, bar Bugs B. So obviously mine, it was particularly going to be, well, Mr. Green and Pirate Joe, the three, and then the other two were kind of new people in Birch Malley. But looking at your group and Group C, I thought, well, they're quite, they're quite tough ones. I think Group C, maybe a lot of people thought one of them might get out in front, but it very much shown that there's a lot of good players out there that they've just not revealed themselves onto the Discord yet. So hopefully going forward, there'll be even more competition going forward with that.
absolutely.
Yeah, Bugs is German, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping we can maybe get some more. I know that gaming and board gaming is somewhat popular in Germany. After all, the digital edition has only two languages, English and German. So perhaps we could get more German players.
Yeah, I love that.
Point.
Yeah, I want to try and get Bugsby like on a call at some point, either as a 1v1 or just to chat in general, because that's a character who has come from nowhere, and there are other players in the tournament who came from nowhere either. But you could see, I mean, no disrespect to them, they participated and they put all their effort into it. But you could see there's like, oh, this learning curve is tough. Whereas suddenly Bugsby, completely unknown quantity, wasn't even on Discord before the tournament. They literally just joined Discord just for this, and then just, I mean, did really well in Group C, and then really survived in the final group. Because you kind of worried, like, oh, are they going to get their comeuppance then in the final league? No, they were the best out of Group C, even though they finished second in Group C. They were then the best player, I think, out of Group C in the finals, and came really, at one point, were like, could get podium here, and or could cause real trouble in second place or whatever. I'm really fascinated to see what their history is, and if they've had a lot of experience with the board game, or maybe they've just been playing a lot of digital but just within their group. I'm very interested. Yeah, I agree. It's funny how the groups all worked out. It was purely random, and the thing is, like, when I did the draw, I did actually record it, but just because of timing over the summer, I didn't upload it. But it was actually done in a way that I didn't actually know what the groups were before the registration. I did the draw before the registration date or the deadline had closed, so I didn't actually know who was going to be in each group. It's just the way it all worked out. And when I saw the group, I was like, well, I'm kind of happy. Like, the regular players are spread out enough. You'd hate having them all in one group. But then still, when I looked at my group, I was like, okay, let's think about this just objectively. Werecraft's beaten me before, and I have to admit, my win rate against you, Werecraft, is actually terrible. So it's just funny how it's all worked out. Spencer's beaten me before. Ondra had beaten me before. Didn't know NB, didn't know Ultimate Dracula. There's somebody else in there. Randiv didn't know either. But I was like, okay, that's immediately half of my competitors have beaten me before. So instinctively, I'm like, right, my only objective here is to try and get out of the group. And then in the end, the way it all panned out, I was like, okay, maybe I can change my expectations slightly here. This went slightly better than I thought. I think as a competitor, there's a huge difference between, and I'm not saying that when we've played, in the past, the three of us or played against any other people that we haven't been trying hard to win. Of course, we're always playing to win, but there's a huge difference between starting a match at 10 o'clock at night after work, then being fully focused on an afternoon on Saturday or on Sunday. It's a completely different mentality of way of playing, and you can see why when you play in the evening, late after work, you can get then these these games go against you. But it's just interesting. I found, at least for me, because most of my games, because of my work schedule, I had to play them at the weekend. There was no other option. I just found I was just playing on it. I was far more alert, far more attentive, and then that higher level of play was possible. If I was forced to play during the evenings, during the week, no chance I would have won. That's just asking for trouble. Though, I mean, I was making mistakes anyway. But imagine you just amplify all those mistakes when you're even tired. And I think that's a lot of the thing that was the issue maybe with some other players, if they're trying to play during, and I understand why they had to play during the week, because weekends are full up with other stuff and whatever, but then maybe some players maybe underperformed a little bit because of that, perhaps.
I think it was testament to the community as well that everyone realised that, because we've got players in North America, we've got players in Ukraine, we've got players in Spain, and across, really global is the best way to encompass it. And it was all very much, okay, well, look, we have to be fair about this. And certainly, I think in most of our games, we found that, okay, well, I'll play late-ish one night if that benefits my opponent, but I would expect then that to be reciprocated where they may have to get up early to make it fair for me. So,
Mm-hmm.
as you say, yeah, all the games weren't, because of where I'm based in the UK, it would be a case of, well, all my games are going to be after 10 at night because I'm playing 3 US opponents. It was very much, okay, well, we can do it this way, or if we can't manage it. So I think that's, you know, thank you again to the community for being flexible with that. And you have to be, otherwise games just wouldn't get played.
Yeah.
And it would then, as you say, then be loaded where if somebody's going to play all the games when they are focused and fresh, that's just not fair, because it is that kind of game, as we all know. If you're not fully focused, then you're going to lose the game. So, yeah, I think that was another thing that, you know, all the players really entered the spirit into. Okay, like, when are you free? When are you free? Let's get this booked. And I think as well, if you look at it from a question I was going to ask you both, well, obviously that was almost 2 months worth of gameplay. Werecraft, how did you find it being in a abbreviated commas tournament game as opposed to a friendly game? Was there a different approach you took? Any different prep at your end, or were you quite sort of, well, it's just another game of Fury of Dracula, and I always focus on it? How did you find that?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
I tried to balance being too I did do like watching videos of people's matches to try to get us like Bugs B, when he did that hide in Strasbourg in that unfortunately unrecorded game. Yeah, I was like, oh, he did this exact same thing in the other game. I think that was also an unrecorded one, but so I was like, oh, drat, I wish I'd thought of that because, oh yeah, he did that before. But yeah, I tried to balance it with trying to keep it in perspective and not over worry about it, because it's, I think being too worried about it can be counterproductive.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a couple of players. I think PCL was one that he said, you know, he was the kind of pressure of a tournament. I mean, it's not like we're doing a tournament in, you know, you mentioned chess before, Werecraft. You know, when I used to play chess, it would be in a hall and you've got others around you and it's all different games, and that's a kind of tournament environment. Whereas we're all still sitting in the same seat in our own house playing it. You don't have that kind of the thrill or the stress of people around you or what have you, but it still had that sort of, this is a tournament. You can't, where in a friendly you might turn around and say, do you know what, I'm going to try this move. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That was almost eradicated in the tournament. And I think players that tried that maybe were more successful than others because they were trying something different that you wouldn't perhaps, oh, right, they never do that. But with the tournament, you've got to try and throw different changes in because, like you say, watching videos, I probably watched as many as I did play in, purely because I was wanting to see if there's any opponent strategy that I'm thinking, right, well, I'm going to be playing them. As you said, Werecraft, you know, are they constantly doing a certain routine in combat, or do they tend to start in, you know, one or two places and that's it? So it was more to get opponent information as opposed to anything else. But yeah, I think it was certainly the way you both played was a case of, you know, it just seemed to be the same. I think most players, bar those that were new to it, I think it was a bit of baptism of fire for those that have never played to jump into the tournament, because it was a case of, you know, no, you know, when I'm playing it, there's no real chat in the band, but it's tournament conditions, if you like. So it was more, you can't just kind of, hey, what's going on? How are you? Blah, blah. You know, it's more, this is tournament. I'll speak to you after the game. So I think that if another tournament happens, which I like to think it would, everyone's going to come for a similar caliber, and it'll be a case of, right, now we start to see. And I think that's why it's quite clever what Quincy's doing with his videos, where they're delayed, that he's not posting them every week, where people can watch and go, that's his strategy. It's kind of, you know, he's delaying it where you can't just jump in, and if you miss the game, you can watch it, and then obviously you're only seeing one side of it. But on the same token, it's still a case of, there's a common theme, which somebody playing might not necessarily see. It's just, you know, part of how they're wired, their kind of muscle memory. And I start here, I do this, I do that. So, yeah, that was quite interesting.
I think
I'd like to. Sorry, go ahead,
no,
Scot-sword.
on you go.
I agree with what you said about the tournament conditions and how they're different from friendly, and I think that just it's so difficult. Like I was thinking of the famous Fischer-Spassky chess championship match in 1972, where Fischer lost the first game by not showing up on time. And then he did a wide variety of erratic things, both on and off the board, which it said unnerved Spassky and caused Spassky to lose focus. So maybe thinking of that, maybe I did some things which were unorthodox with the intention of, well, this will unnerve my opponent, but also like I did the start in the Mr. Green game in Baltica, which ended badly because I was caught on the first day, in part because I said, okay, I have a reputation for starting in Italy because I've done that several times in a row. Maybe he'll think I'm in Italy.
Yeah, that happened to me too, because obviously Rossco was spectating most of my matches. So then it was quite late in the tournament. We had to play, and you were playing Hunters against me, Rossco. And I was like, oh, damn it, Roscoe's been spectating every match I've been as Dracula, because I wanted to start, because I've developed a bit of a start. I do a certain routine in Baltica, or the same thing when I saw you doing like the Italy thing. I mean, now he knows from MB, but I saw that Italy thing. I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. I could do something like that. But then as soon as I knew Roscoe had seen all that stuff, so I was like, right, okay, let's start in Barcelona. Let's do shenanigans like this instead. And then typical Roscoe then moves both me and Gadalmi to discard Italy.
Sorry. That now please on TV.
I was going to say also the other thing that came up for me was in a match against Quincy.
I need to take a break for a moment, please.
Oh, that's okay, no problem. On you go. Yeah, it was in a game against Quincy where I was playing as Hunters, and I remember got my first hired scouts, and I said, Quincy never starts an island. I'm not going to check island. I'm going to check these plays because he likes to do Teen Wolf and all this sort of stuff, right? And then he'd started an island, and I was just like, really? Fuck it, I should have realized, like, because that's like a good way to do it. Because if I hadn't called him, I think it was with a newspaper or whatever it was, I wouldn't have got there in time. But then that's the thing, you do have to mix it up. I'm interested to see what Werecraft thinks about this. I feel as Hunters, your plan is not, you don't have to be unpredictable. I think maybe there's small things you can do, and maybe, as you said, like you had your game where you swapped Seward and Van Helsing around, and it was like, what is going on here? But I was trying to exploit it to my advantage, and I did, so that worked out fine. But I feel like as Hunters, be efficient. That's all you can do, and depending on how the events come out and how the items come out, you just need to be adaptable and be efficient with all the cards you have. It's more with Dracula, then yeah, there's a need to be deceptive and inconsistent with your play. Because eventually people will just realize, oh, you always start there. Okay, well, I'll check there then. You have to mix it up. You have to do different things. But that's just my viewpoint. I view those two different sides. And I was doing it like when I knew I had a Dracula game coming up. Who am I playing against? Right, I'm playing against this player. Has this player maybe seen my videos? Possibly, maybe not. Oh, it's Rossco, right? Rossco definitely has, right? So I can't do that stuff. I have to do something different. But
the thing is, the counter to that is, as you said, Werecraft said, it's a self-doubt, because had you started where you always do and they don't check it because they assume, well, you're not going to start there because you know that's where, and then you start questioning yourself, and rather than just going,
yep,
always starts there, so he's probably going to start there again. I'll check there. Oh, there you are. You do start to, it's almost you give too much credit to your opponent and say, well, maybe they're going to try something really different. And it's like, no, I start here because it's out of reach, it's safe, and as we've said many times, if the Dracula play is a case of play the move that's the safest rather than what's going to, this might confuse them, because if you get caught, you get screwed over. So it's, but yeah, I think with that is a case of, right, well, you always start there. Well, yeah, because of the reason why. Same with the Hunters though. If the Hunters always use the same setup, then as Dracula players, you're already planning ahead a strategy, because all of a sudden, if Van Helsing started in Paris, then you'd be like, oh, actually, hang on, that might rule out Strasbourg, Geneva, Marseille. Oh, do I go to the UK? Well, no, because they might check they were hired scout. But if you always know, Seward's in Madrid, Van Helsing's in London, and the two of them are either on the same spot or one city apart, you can kind of, right, you've probably got your first 3 or 4 moves planned, because that's where they're going to be. So if hunters started to change theirs, but again, that never sort of happened. But it's always another one just to throw it out there in case. Oh, well, that's I know, like Pirate Joe, for example, has got a different setup, and it's very much just search all the areas, and all of a sudden process elimination. By the end of the week, he's found you, even if he hasn't by papers. But by doing that, it leaves a lot of empty space for Dracula to move around in. But yeah, that was. I think it is relevant on both sides. Probably more so as Drac, as you say, because the hunters are being more reactive to his movement.
Yeah.
But
then Dracula also has to be adaptive, based on what counter cards come out, how the hunters move. Are you? How many turns do you think you're safe? Can you take more turns on land, or do you just escape to sea immediately? That's the sort of thing. A lot of it. I mean, I think with hunters, it's probably more likely to have different theories. For me, efficiency is like the key thing. I'm going to do some stuff differently in friendly matches. I want to do different, especially when playing 1v1. I'm going to do different setups and just see, does it work, does it not work, why not, that sort of thing. But the setup I'm not saying I take credit for it. Just that small change, moving me and Gaddafi together. Right, you can trade items between them.
Every game, so you do take credit for it. You're using my setup, are you?
Yeah. No, but in terms of like all the others, like I didn't say that Van Helsing had to start in the UK. I didn't say that Seward had to start at Madrid. Maybe you should swap them around. Maybe put like Seward and Mina together or something. I don't know. But
Pardon me.
That's okay, no problem. But I feel like just based upon the positions on the board, they can cover most areas once they get things like fast horses and things like that. And then there are times where that doesn't happen, but then as a hunter player, you just have to be adaptable. Go, okay, I can't stop this from maturing. That's fine. So that thing matures if it's hoax, vampire, whatever. Right. Damage limitation. How do I make my situation that I don't give any more points away? That's what you're having to try and figure out, and I think that's the sort of thing you have to do. But that's just me. That's just my theory. I think others will have different ways of doing it, and that's fine. That's what makes it a really good game. Maybe coming with a slightly different approach to different things, then that's great.
I would say both of you in your hunter play is probably the best at doing that, regardless of it's about knowing when to move, when to play the cards. I think you both got that down to a very good skill where you'll if you're a Drac player or even watching the games you guys have been both involved in, you can start seeing a hunter player move, which somebody else might go, why are you moving there? You're moving away from it. But others are kind of, hang on, you're moving there because something's getting set up. Werecraft, you're very good at that. If you've got your chartered carriage, I've noticed you'll move your hunters, which initially doesn't look like they're any threat, and then all of a sudden, Drac's found, you've got 3 hunters on them. Is that something that just how you play strategy games? Is that how you see things, or have you changed or adapted it over the course of playing Fury?
I think that's a good question. Combination of experience and being taught by Quincy and others, but Quincy was the one who really made me understand the basics of it pays to supply a lot and hold on to cards, and you can do double moves with renewed vigor, which is very important because it can get you set up 2 or 3v1s, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that. I don't know, but all that said, I've had games where I've either lost or almost lost. So I don't know exactly. I mean, I think that I certainly am not that much better than the other hunter players in the final group, at least.
I think it was one of those. Again, the other thing that Scott sort of said there, when it's a tournament, you do have your rivals, and there's always that kind of, all right, they beat me the first time round, or I think it was something you'd said, Werecraft, in one of your games where I think it was our game when you were Dracula and you were going to do a move in the previous game, and I think either you got caught or something, so that then forced you not to do that move again in our game because you keep that residual memory of, I don't want to do that because I got caught last time, and if I do it again and Consecrated Grounds played, let's not do it, because as Dracula you've got to assume, rightly or wrongly, that you've got to assume the hunters on their first week have picked up all the cards they need, which sometimes can be detriment because Dracula may become more of you may play more hamstrung because if they've got that, and they may never have Consecrated Ground in the whole game, and you're playing it thinking, I think what I try and do as Drac is well, I'm going to do this move, and if they've got it, they've got it. If they haven't, they haven't. But let's try it, because otherwise, second guessing what they have, and they're not going to tell you, and they may never draw it. It's more, yeah, okay. You kind of lose. You lose momentum, especially as Dracula, when you're trying to work with that. Did you guys find when you were playing that if you were playing the return leg, if you like, of an opponent, if the previous match had been a victory for them, did you go into it with a different mindset, or again was it just another right? I need to play this opponent. I don't know. It doesn't matter how many we've played if they're a rival or not. I mean, you and Werecraft, Scot-sword have got, like when you joined Fury, kind of Werecraft was your sensei.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a kind of all right? I'm playing that now, and as you say, we don't raise the game, but did your mindset switch when you're both playing somebody that has got the better of you before, or how did you approach that?
In terms of just in general, I'd probably say no, because if you look at everybody in the final league, apart from Bugs, because I hadn't played them prior to the tournament, and also maybe I hadn't played Pizza Wizard much prior to the tournament either, but everybody else, I'd beaten them at some point and I'd lost to them at some point. So I'm like, right, I know that they have the capability of beating me, I have the capability of beating them. Let's just play that game as a single event. I guess then the pressure comes in a bit more, not from maybe playing specifically Werecraft or specifically Rossco or whoever, but just the fact of, oh, I need to win this game because I want to try and catch Werecraft. If I lose it, Bugsby and Rossco and everybody else is behind me, they're going to catch up. You're playing more like the situation of, oh, there's pressure on me for this game because of this reason. I think specifically the two players probably I was more nervous about playing would be actually Werecraft and Mr. Green, just because I know prior to the tournament my win rates were terrible. But at the same time, I was like, well, especially against Mr. Green, because my Mr. Green win rate was awful. The fact I beat him twice in the final league just kind of still astounds me, to be honest. But at the same time, I was just like, okay, well, free game. Especially the fact I played him as Dracula first. I was like, okay, this is a free game. If I win it, great. If I don't, oh well, that's just the way it goes. I had the exact same situation as you, though, Roscoe. I had a couple of occasions, both with CG. It was against Mr. Green and against you. And you will hear it in my commentary where I said, right, I'm just going to bank on the fact that they don't have heavily hosts on the right people to block me in and kill me. If they do, oh well, tough. I'll accept the defeat. But I'm just going to bank on probability they don't have it. And it worked out both times. I mean, fortunately, the second time against you, you were very kind and you hadn't traded it to the right person. But
that was on. Yeah, that was. Yeah,
no, but like if I'd lost to that, I'd be like, okay, fine. He got all the heavenly hose. I can't do anything about that. There's nothing I can do. If I take one more turn to move, the chance of me losing increases because of XYZ reasons. So sometimes you just have to go for it. And if you lose, oh well, tough. It's fine. That's just the way it goes. And you can't have it all your own way. You have to give it. Some things go against you sometimes. I can't remember what the original question was. Whatever. I'm sure Werecraft's got some insights, I'm sure.
Werecraft, how about yourselves? Is it a similar approach, or did you have a harboring hatred towards beating Scot-sword?
It's very, as with a lot of different things about Fury of Dracula, I feel like the answer is very complicated and messy in terms of, my approach towards a particular player. It's very murky and it's also somewhat fluid in terms of, because as I said, I tried to balance focusing on it with relaxing about it. And as for what you were saying about CG and how to balance, okay, I'll do this because even if I really can't avoid CG, and doing this other thing is more risky in other respects versus in other situations, maybe doing something is riskier. Like, it's difficult to judge how much doing something a calculated risk versus a mistake, different situations. And that's because it's so complicated, all the nuances of, if I move into this different place, the information that gives my opponent and the encounters I throw down, and what are the chances of me being jumped now versus next turn. And it's all very difficult to plan out and just calculate, okay, like in this situation, if I have a chance to draw this many cards, what's the probability that I'll get this? What's the probability that I get that? What's the probability that I get nothing useful?
I love it. As you said, being fluid and being adaptable is like the key aspect of this game. and it's not something that you can teach. That's the thing. It's not like you can teach somebody. Like, you know, when I started, obviously, you know, I had some Dracula games, and then Werecraft said, "Come on, let's do a 2v1 as hunters, and I'll show you what to do." So yeah, that's kind of your own downfall there, Werecraft. If you hadn't done that, then maybe this tournament would have gone a bit differently. But I think just on both sides, like, you have to be adaptable, and that's not something you can teach. You just, and it's so contextual. I mean, every discussion we've ever had on this game, Rossco, where we've got in, this is why our conversation's always like 3 hours long, because it's like, oh, it depends. It depends on this. It depends on this. And as you said, eventually you just instinctively realize. A lot of the time, I don't know if I'm actually thinking about what I'm doing, but the fact it's working, like, most of the time, not all the time, there are times I make huge mistakes. But the fact it works most of the time, I don't know if I'm actually thinking about it or just instinctive at this point. I'm not sure, or if I'm just blundering my way through it and I'm actually getting lucky. I'm not quite sure what it is, to be honest. Probably a combination of all of them. I think that's the problem. When you if you start overthinking with this game, you're almost destined to lose, because it exhausts you. It makes you so exhausted. And then when you need to make a critical decision later on, you don't see it, or you're already like 2 or 3 turns behind where you should be. And that's the thing. And that's something, I don't know if you can teach it. It just comes with experience, or it's with mindset. I have no idea. I don't know what the answer is to it at all.
And it's difficult as well, because every opponent you're playing, regardless how experienced or inexperienced they are, they're bringing their own mindset to how they approach any game.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you might find that some players are, okay, let's just go in for this and do it this way. Some might be a bit more passive, some might be a bit more conservative, and until you start playing them, don't know yourself. Again, it's one of those that you can set out a certain strategy, but not a lot. A question I want to ask you both: this game, is there one? And again, this can mean a game that you won but was tough, or again a loss. But is there one game that stands out from the tournament that you both came away from going, I was lucky to win that, or that was tough going and he deserved to win, or did they all just meld into one big 2-month tournament?
I can go first. I'm trying to, again, as I said, they've all melded together. I think there's quite a lot of my matches. If I watch them back now, I probably wouldn't remember doing most of the things. The one I can instinctively remember, just off the top of my head, there were a couple. The Hunter game against you in particular, but the one I can remember was against Mr. Green. I was Hunters, and I was behind the entire game. I was not playing well that day, and I thought he was going to win. But as Hunters, you always have a chance to catch, because you've got Sense of Emergency, or you have these big movement cards. You have things you can do, and I managed to catch him in the East, and I got him into a 2v1 combat. And I'd already planned in my head, right, we do this combat, hopefully kill him. If not, I've got CG, I can pin him in, I can force him into Mina, then we fight the next day. Because I knew I didn't have to win that combat to win the game. I had another day. But then, for some ridiculous reason, in the combat, I used Heavenly Host, and it got fanged. So then, because of that, the combat was more sketchy, because I was then in a 1v1, I think I managed to escape. I can't remember exactly how I escaped. But then, my Consecrated Grind was less effective. And I had to then, he was able to move to, like, I think it was Sophia, and put down an encounter. And he put down a Reckless. Of course he would, because he wants to try and he had 1 point to win. And then it was just complete luck of the draw with combat. I think I had a planned ambush or something. I was able to avoid all the fangs. And it's a situation like that where you're like, why am I making it so difficult for myself? If I just hadn't played Heavenly Host in that combat, I would have won the game. I think I must have said it in commentary, when we're going through all those final combats with Reckless Vampires, I could have finished the game like 10 minutes ago. Why am I having all this stress having to finish this game off? And that was one where I came away and went, well, I really did not deserve to win that game. And then the fact I got myself into a position to win it, and then I fucked it up. Sometimes you're just like, wow, that's just ridiculous. If he'd won it, then again, it seemed like the game against Bugs B that I lost. At the same time, it's like, okay, if you lose that game, then you're kind of asking to lose it, given the fact that sometimes you can't control these things, but when you're in control of a situation and then you take unnecessary risk for no reason, then you're like, okay. Then you have to just take the defeat on the chin and go, okay, you fucked that one up. There's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, that was pretty close. The game against Mr. Green was Dracula again. That was pretty ridiculous. Just the whole... You saw that game, Rossco, the whole scenario of that game, how it panned out, because there was like a rules misunderstanding, and he gave me loads of free turns to get away. The game that we had, Werecraft, where I was Drac, was again really came down to the wire. And I remember there was one point in that game where I think it was in I can't remember what I think it was in 15. There was a point where you said, "Oh, maybe you can kill Kodami and you would get 12 points." And in the end, those IDS could have actually been really vital the way it all ended up. But at the same time, I was like, "Nah, I want to try and win this. I'm going to take a bigger risk and just try to win rather than losing with 12." I'm going to take the risk and try to win it instead and see. And then in the end, I didn't win because you had double four warns and all that sort of stuff. But I made mistakes before that point. I could have probably potentially killed Godalming and stuff. But there's such fine margins, and you notice it immediately when you look back. I mean, I have an advantage recording most of my games. I can, if I want to, the next day, fresh, with a fresh mind over breakfast or whatever, watch it back, and you'll notice, like, if you hear my commentary, there'll be times where I notice my mistake instantly. Or there'll be other times the next day I'll be like, you idiot, you should have done that, you should have done that, you had this card, you had this card. You see it. And I think that's another aspect. I haven't heard it with Fear of Dracula, but I've heard of it with, like, I used to play a lot of League of Legends, not very well, but that was one thing where the good players I used to watch, their advice was always the same. Watch your gameplay back. Because you'll see, if you're aware enough, you'll see your own mistakes, and then you'll realize, right, and then you'll know for the future, don't do that again. Take 5 seconds extra to do this turn. If that's the difference between dying or staying alive, do this, do this, do this. Those would be the ones for me. I think the one against Mr. Green in particular, when I finished that game, I was like, whew, I got away with one. But they're all really close. If you see the games, they're all really close. Very competitive.
Yeah. Yourself,
I agree with everything. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just asking you the same question. Was there any that stand out for you, or was it a case of you just take them on, pass it, and then move on to the next one?
There were several which stood out for me. But I agree entirely with what Scot-sword was saying about going back. I wish sometimes that with other things besides games like this, we could go back and play the videotape, because I think that you'd have a lot of insights about that. I've heard that in American football, that's something that all professional coaches use. They take video and they exhaustively analyze it, because doing that, they can pin down like what went wrong with a play. Anyway, but sorry, back to your original question. My final game with Bugs as hunters, where he beat me at 1 health in the final combat, that was a real epic slugfest.
Wow.
Where he got through the east-west passage, and then when he was deep in the east, instead of going to the coast and mucking around there and going to sea, he did try the double back, going from, and almost like going in a figure 8, which is Dracula is quite risky, because you're generally going back towards where the hunters are, and you're also going through an area where it's narrow and it's easy to get trapped. And I drew CG right when I needed it, right as he was at Vienna, and I was like, okay, I have him now.
Wow.
I didn't.
I think that was one we were watching. There was one. It was one of your games. There was about 4 of us that were just spectating. It was just like,
I know.
Oh my god! What? Oh my! What the? It was like, it was fantastic. It was like watching a live event, and it was just like, you guys are just like, because you're watching it, and good. Well, that's it. Yeah, Werecraft's got him now. He's not going. Holy shit! Oh my god! He's done it. It's like it was just fantastic as a spectator to watch it as well.
You know what happened? You and I, Rossco, we were commenting on a different game. I think it was Mr. Green Pizza Wizard, and I think the Werecraft Bugs game had just like started maybe like 10 or 15 minutes earlier. We watched Pizza Wizard, Mr. Green, good game, blah, blah, blah. And then it was when we left, I think maybe Gyro was with us, and then Pizza Wizard hopped on, was saying hello, whatever. And then it was just the fact then we saw the game was still in the lobby. I was like, oh, well, this has to be close to the end, but this must be a really good game. Let's just go in and jump in. And it was like the last like 20 minutes. And we saw CG in Munich and all this stuff. I was like, what is going on? Obviously, as an organizer, I had to kind of keep my emotions in check. But obviously, there's a lot on the line. I want to win the league. I was like, cheering for Bugs, but just the game was just ridiculous. Just such a close ending. It's just, again, fine margins all the way.
The suicidal heroic leap. You came in just after that.
Oh yeah, we missed that.
That was it. I remember I remember seeing that in comments. You said that had been played. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but yeah, that was. And there's been many I've watched like that, and it's been a case of outside you don't have that that impending fear of, oh, I could lose this. You can just watch it, and every game. I mean, I think that's every game anybody's watched. There's none that's been, oh yeah, that was okay. It's been pretty much down to, I mean, the one I think Quincy recently did with me and him, it went into the fifth week, and we were like, does the game actually know what to do? It's already done the third piece of fury. What's going to happen now? Is it just going to like explode? And it was just 2 hours, 20 minutes or something. It was just back and forth and back and forth, and it's like, when you're playing it, you're like, Jesus. And then when you spectate these games, I think that's again, it's credit to the level of play that all the opponents had.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why when I was doing like commentary and stuff, talking about the positions, I never said this person's in last place. I always said in 8th place in the final league, because it's very disingenuous to say, oh, they're in last place, because it's the 8 best players from the community who have qualified. You're not in last. Yeah. And we said it before, like, I think in the end, I can't remember, I think it was, if I remember the table, maybe Quincy finished bottom, but Pizza Wizard was bottom for a long time. But we said, nah, Pizza Wizard is a good player, and you have to be really careful. You could easily lose, and that's I think that's a huge credit to everybody, like how good the competition was. And then now, from a recording perspective, obviously, I'd love it if everybody recorded. I mean, I realize some people can't do that because of technology or whatever, but even still, we now have this playlist of ridiculous gameplay, like probably some of the best games that the community's ever seen, just because we took up to new heights with this league, and they're just a free resource. Anybody can go and watch as many of them as they want, and they can really learn some interesting things from it. And so it's a great advertisement for the game as a whole, not just obviously for our community is really good, we want to try and build this, but just still as an advert for the whole game. I mean, how great is that? And the fact that I think Quincy put up on Board Game Geek the statistics and with the win rate, and it was causing quite a bit of discussion. Everyone going, oh, wow, really? It was that close between Hunters and Dracula win rate. Oh, this is amazing, blah, 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 right? So it's really great to see, actually. Really
Pardon
great.
me. I need to take a 5-minute break. I'll be back after that.
Okay, no problem.
That's okay.
Shortly. Yeah, I was going to ask you both, but I'll ask you here, Scott. So,
sure.
You have, I mean, you and I have spoken off air. Listen to me chatting, using all the terminology and media.
Not a Luddite anymore. Wow, I'm very proud.
Headphones work and everything. Yeah, we've spoken off air about this, but prior to the tournament or even the game night, did you have a more favourable faction you enjoyed playing? And since the tournament, how has your thought process on that changed, or has it?
Yeah, I'd definitely say prior to the tournament, I would have, if you'd asked me, are you a Hunter player or a Dracula? Obviously, I would be happy to play either. But if you asked me which one I'd say Hunter player all day long. Just because, I mean, a bit biased because of my first experiences, but I had my first 3 games with Dracula, even though I came close to winning my first one. I mean, I died very quickly, but I got loads of points because of one good combat. But then the fact, Werecraft took me under his wing and said, come on, let's play Hunters, we'll play a couple of games. I think maybe I played one with Mr. Green against you or something. So because of that, the bug had bitten for Hunters. So I was like, right, I've got this problem now I've got to solve. I've got to understand all of these cards. I need to understand this. So I was fascinated with this. And, going into like the final stage of the tournament, or even, the first stage. I'll do it for the final stage. I might have said this on camera, I can't remember. But when I looked at everybody, I said, right, I'm not saying I'm going to win every game. That's ridiculous. That'd be really, really hard to do. But I could give anybody a good game with my Hunters. I'd make it a competitive game. Whereas with Dracula, I had really low expectations. Like before the tournament, my Dracula win rate was something like 40%, which is not terrible, but clearly, it's on the wrong side of the 50% line. So I was like, no. So I kind of realized it. It was like, well, if I'm going to win this tournament, I'm not saying I'm going to win all 7, but let's just say I win all 7 of my Hunter games. How many of my Dracula games am I going to have to win? And as soon as you started looking about it, and Mr. Green and I were talking about it before, we had a little conversation. We're like, how many games out of 14 do you think you're going to have to win? And genuinely, I did say maybe about 10. And then, funny enough, it was 10 was the winning number. Not that I realized it was going to be that way. But then I was like, oh crap! Then that means I'm going to have to win 3. If I win all my Hunter games, I'm going to have to win 3 of my 7 Dracula games. And if I don't win all my Hunter games, I'm going to have to win even more. No chance. That's going to be really tough. And in the end, it happened that way. But then now, if you gave me the choice and you said, right, Hunters or Dracula, I'd pick Dracula. For me, there's a, I think once the Hunters have a much greater learning curve at the beginning. Trying to get a handle, especially when you're trying to do it 1v1, you've got 4 of these fucking people you have to control, right? That's really awkward to do. It's way harder when you play in physical version. When you're playing it on the tabletop, that's even harder because you've got to constantly flip cards and whatever, rather than flicking between a screen. But controlling 4 hunters is really difficult, really tough to do. And full credit to anybody who especially if they're a new player and they come on and they want to do it, like full credit to them. But once you get over that initial learning curve and you've got a basis of what you're doing, yeah, sure, you can always improve. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I make loads of mistakes every game. It's about then hopefully realizing that you've made that mistake and you can try and correct it later and be more aware for things. But I feel like as Dracula, it's a really strange character where to learn at the beginning is easy because you've only got one character control. It only does one move. It moves one space, puts down an encounter. That essence is quite easy. It's very easy to grasp at the beginning. But once you're against competent hunter players, and you're right, wait, as Dracula, your job is you have to try and get as many things to mature as possible, which is really tough. If the hunter's on their game, nothing's going to mature. And you have to try and survive all the way until probably most likely the 4th week, because if not many things are maturing, you're not going to get points from vampires. That, for me, is a much harder task. And I think the skill ceiling for Dracula is higher. That's just my gut feeling. And I think even though I get more stressed playing as Dracula because you're seeing all these hunters closing in around you, and because it's so, as you said, the game's so asymmetric, right? You don't know what the hunters have, but to you it seems like the hunters have loads of events and loads of items, and just one bad move and you're getting killed instantly. And then everything you've done for the last 3 weeks means nothing. But I feel like that, even though I get more stress playing it, the challenge of it is greater. And I'll be honest, even though I enjoyed all my hunter wins, if I'm able to get a competent hunter player, whoever that is, and I beat them as Dracula, there's a little bit of like extra to it. Like, I've just done you. I've been able to trick you for, say, 3-4 weeks of the game. There's something a little bit extra to it, which I think is really fascinating. I think I'm gonna be a player that's gonna swing backwards and forwards. I'll have spells where I'll do quite a lot of Dracula and test out lots of things with Dracula, and then I'll flip back to hunters again, keep that skill up, and then flip back again. But it just depends on who I'm playing against. If people are keen to play one side, I'll just pick the other. I'm very easy. But for example, this video is going to go up probably next month at some point. But I had a match last night where I was Dracula against Pizza Wizard and Spencer and Captain Gyro, and that was really fascinating because again I was trying to play a really good Dracula game, but it's completely different because you're hearing all this communication with the hunters, so you're viewing things a little bit differently. No, I love the challenge of Dracula. I think I love it. But obviously, if I had to pick which one am I more likely to win on, then I'd say hunters. But I enjoy both, but just for that little extra challenge, I like Dracula. It's fun.
Pardon me.
That's okay.
I'm back.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to interject, please. I agree with everything you said about the challenge of playing Dracula and the fulfillment of winning as Dracula.
Okay, I'm glad I'm the only one.
For yourself, Werecraft, did you have, like, I don't know if you heard my question before you went off, but it was pre-tournament and post-tournament. Did you have a faction you preferred to play, and that's now changed, that you've seen, because every player's been forced to play? I mean, the one that comes to mind is obviously Quincy, where most of his gameplay has been as hunters, and he was then forced to play as Dracula. Did you find that your mind's changed and you're thinking, oh, actually, yeah, they're both quite as good, or I would still stick to the one faction, or are you, did it have any effect on you at all?
Good question. Part of me, I think, will always prefer hunters because I like the feeling of being in control. And I think that as hunters, there's more of that because, Dracula's encounters are a little bit more, they're not as strong as hunter events overall, and you can memorize them, whereas as Dracula, you have to always be wondering, does he have renewed vigor plus the movement cards? Does he have enough? Is he somebody who would use them now to jump on me? if I go back this way to try to trick him, does he have surprising return to figure out where I am and consecrated ground to take advantage of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm being a little long-winded, but I would say that I do like playing Drac as well, and I do think that I learned a lot about how to play him in the tournament, and I left it thinking I could see myself enjoying Drac more in the future. But right now I feel like I'm not quite as good as Drac as playing Hunters. And I agree with what Scot-sword said about the challenge and how it's very difficult judging like where to, what risks to take and everything.
Well, it's no surprise you both like Hunters because both of you have fucking drew the cards at the right time. And honestly, I hate Hunters for the fucking record because, and it's not me bad apples. It's call it luck or whatever. I just don't get the cards that I need, and then you're down to just like, right, okay, well I'll work with what I've got, which is all you do. But there's some games you watch and there's some opponents, i.e. both you two, where it's almost like you'll say, I could really do with renewed vigor, and then ta-da! Oh, they got renewed vigor, and you're like, how the fuck are they getting these? How is this happening? It's like you can't. It's like the first week, and all of a sudden they've got renewed vigor, heroic leap, great strength, consecrated ground, and you're like, this is. I remember one game Werecraft, it was very honourable of you, but I remember after our game, you messaged me saying, I feel like I need to apologise for the cards that I got. They just fell when I needed them to, and it was like, when I've played as Hunters, it's like, oh, right, okay, let's see long night, blood transfusion, and it's like, there's nothing else you can do other than just keep supplying and hope you get them. But, and it's a case of, and I'm you obviously, I prefer Dracula because funnily enough, conversely to what you said, I feel more in control as Dracula than playing as the Hunters because Dracula can do things with what he has himself instead of, again, if you take away that element of getting the cards when you need them, then the Hunter's job becomes a lot more difficult. For example, if no newspapers in the first week and you don't have Jonathan Harker and you miss your hired scouts, then all of a sudden, what do the Hunters do? Do they start moving to try and psychic bond? If you get the cards that you need, then great, that's fine. But I think Dracula players, you have to assume you're going to get found in the first week, either by one method or the other. But if you don't get them, then all of a sudden it's like, right, okay, well, you're now chasing, so when do you have time to supply? Do you now night supply because you're trying to clear a 6-day trail, or do you just let you choose your battles and you just let one burn off and go, well, do you know what, it is what it is, let's just focus on where Drac is? Do you both have so that scenario, for example, do you both have you've got to go and burn, if it's a rumor token, do you by any means get there to burn it, or has it been occasions in games where you've decided, do you know what, I'll take the 7-point hit or the hoax, but I'd rather just keep on form to try and get Dracula, or do you allow yourselves to sort of get dragged away by the fear of getting 6 points or whatever? How do you both face that?
I'll answer this one first. I think that is a very difficult question to answer. It's one of the most difficult things in the game to judge as Hunters, and I've gotten burned where I've focused too much on clearing encounters that either slowed me down too much or that couldn't be cleared. And I've also gotten burned when I let something mature, and it's been the same way as Dracula, where my opponent didn't clear something that he should have cleared, and that helped me a lot. Or he went out chasing something like a bats, just in the game against bugs. I cleared a hoax on day 6 that I almost didn't clear because Seward had no weapon and he had 2 white ones, which would have been really bad if it had been a spy, but it turned out to be a hoax. And then a little bit later, based on that, I was like, oh, here's another one I can clear because it's also on day 6, even though I really want to be focusing on Drac now. Oh, it's bats.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? It's really, and the problem is, however it works out, you're fucked with it, because if you don't clear it and it is something that can win the opponent the game, you're like, I should have checked that. I should have just gone back. But again, shoulda, woulda, coulda. You can't. You make that decision at the time whether do I let this go. Especially what I found as a hunter is if it's a port location, it's a case of, well, it's going to be a fog. Do I just let it go? It can't mature. Get all the players out of the country. But then somewhere on the other shoulder is, what if it's a, you know, even without a rumor token, what if it's a 4-point aristocratic and that's another 4
Yeah.
points, and it clears the trail, which could be clearing an ocean trail or giving
Yeah.
a move pawn back, or
Yeah.
it's really, watching you guys play is a different level to me, because it seems that you have it in hand. It's like, right, that's what you need to do. You know who you're sending there, and even if there's occasions where you are dragged out of position, you get the, you know, or you have the supply or the stock in there to get back on track relatively quickly, and that's just down to how you guys place and plan your hunters. And it's something that I need to get better at, because I'm just, it's like, well, it always seems to be the wrong hunter in the wrong place with the wrong stuff. Whereas you guys seem to, you know, you manage to move heroic leap to the right hunter to do the damage, or that's what's interesting about watching you guys play.
That immediately when you're saying that, the thing that springs to mind is the game that you two played, where I was commentating, and you had like 2 vampires to deal with, Rossco, in like Varna and Constanta, and the 2 hunters with stakes were in Vienna. I was like, I didn't know that because I couldn't see what the hunter cards were, but then I was like, oh my days. I agree.
My finger was hovering over the GG on there, because I thought he's going to mature the reckless in Varna. He's going to mature, and then there was a reckless in Constanta, and I was like, oh fuck. And then fortunately you layered, and I was like, hang on, there's a glimmer there. But by then it was a case of my guys were all out of position. It was, you know, they'd taken damage, and it's like, and again, that's one of the games I look back on where I not thrown a bone, but it was lucky to win that, because had you not landed back in Lisbon, even with the fog, I just had the right cards eventually, and I managed to get my guys over there. But it was, even then, it was a case of, right, well, you've rule formed, you could still be in one of other, and there's only 1 day left. But you know, it was that whole, I mean, that would have been a second rumor token matured, but Seward had 2 stakes, and you're like, well, he's in Vienna, what the fuck, you know, you can't get there. What we do, try and throw them from a distance, you know, it doesn't, but then there was no reason. I think that was one as well where can't let that one burn. You know, if it was 0, I might have gone, you know what, if it's too reckless, you're either going to get 7 or you're going to burn it and burn a reckless vampire, which does my job anyway. Then I can ditch a stake, but keep my hunters in a relatively central board area that they can get to where they need to be, or do supplies or transfers with each other. But I mean, watching you guys do that, it is an art, and again, hat off to you, because it's about knowing when to pass the cards to the right people at the right time and not getting caught up in the fury of Dracula.
I think this. I'll. There you go, Werecraft.
I wanted to comment a few things about that. I mean, I definitely made a mistake there. I think part of it was the fact that you ran away from the first reckless, and so I thought maybe, okay, he's not thinking I have to kill this, so maybe he's got something up his sleeve to deal with the second one. But and then I was thinking about actually changing you changed your name, your username. I was thinking about changing mine to Werecraft13, because the number of Lisbon is 31 and 13 is 31 backwards.
You were waking up in cold sweats.
Yeah, because I lost 2 games in the tournament as Dracula by moving to Lisbon.
Wow. Wow. That's
you should have learned your lesson after the first one, Werecraft.
Lisbon is my nemesis, not the best place to go. And it's interesting is in the final game against Scot-sword as Dracula, I twice did not mature a non-rumor vampire, once in Florence and once in Rome, in order to try to get a hoax and a rumor vampire matured. And with the outcome of that, we'll see. Everybody who watches the video with Scot-sword will upload in the future.
Mm-hmm. That'd be interesting.
So I feel like I learned from my mistake there, or at least they tried to.
Yeah, but then funny the way it worked out. Then it worked against you. I think that's the thing. I'll chip in with a couple of things. So from a hunter perspective, this is something I want to do a video on. People talk in the game that is like a game of like 3 games in one. You've got deduction, movement, combat. The way I view it is it's like there's a 4th one, especially from a hunter perspective. But even as Dracula, you have to think about this too. And the way I call it is like resource management. I don't mean it like literally like, oh, I've got food and wood and stuff, and let's trade it to build. No, what I mean is, so you only have hunters can only hold on to a certain number of events. They can only hold on to so many items. And also, a resource is your actions. As a hunter player, I mean, I'm not going to do the maths on camera, but you've got 4 actions in the day, 4 actions at night, times by how many days you're going to play this game. So, and I'm not saying I do all these, I'm not doing these calculations, like the meme of like the person with all like the maths equations around them. I'm not saying like I'm doing that. A lot of it's instinctive, but as a hunter player, a lot of the time you have to decide, right, I need to stop this thing from maturing, because all matured things are bad. Unless it's like bats, then that's pretty... I mean, there's been times before where, as Dracula, the hunters have left one encounter to mature, and it's a bat. And you're just seething, as Dracula, you're just sitting there seething, swearing at the screen, like, no, you're supposed to go and check it. That's why I put it there. But, most things maturing is bad. As a hunter player, you're always taught instinctively to think this. But then at the same time, it's all about cost. Right. If this thing matures, yes, it's bad. But how many actions am I going to lose having to deal with this? And if those, again, I don't know what the number is, because I don't know if there is a defined number. But if you believe that the cost to go and stop this thing from maturing outweighs the benefit of stopping it from mature, you just let it mature. Just keep going in the direction where Dracula's going and try and get ahead of him. That's what you need to do. And that's a really tough thing. There'll be times where you get it wrong. And that's the thing. But then it's just about the law, the probability. If you get that aspect right, yeah, sure, there'll be times you'll get punished for it. Because there'll be a hoax mature and they get like Darkest Returns or Emmanuel or whatever, right? Whatever it is. Or it is a vampire and they get 4 points, and those 4 points are critical because then they only get 1 point for victory or whatever. But there are times where you just have to decide, I can't stop this because it's impossible, it's going to put me too far out of position, or because Dracula's already halfway across the map. You just have to say, no, I'm going to go this way. And if it matures, tough. I'll bank on it. And then as the converse side, as a Dracula thing, I maybe disagree that Dracula is the one who's in... I agree with Werecraft that, Dracula has maybe a little bit less control because they don't know what the hunters have. But then the way from a Dracula perspective that I think about it is, right, what is the most irritating solution for a hunter player to be in when the hunters are forced to make difficult decisions? If a hunter player is operating more or less on autopilot, where they're going, oh yeah, I'll supply with this character, I'll go and stop this mature with this character, I'll do this, and they're not having to really think to play, that's a bad situation for Dracula to be in. As soon as you force the hunters to be in really awkward decisions like, do I have to stop this to mature or do I move? Do I supply now or do I have to go and stop this or move? That's when you eke out the advantage. And then if the hunters can just sit there all day and supply, yeah, I agree, that's a problem for Dracula. So then what you do is you do everything to disrupt that. You make the hunters' lives as difficult as possible. Be unpredictable with your encounters as much as possible. Lay down, save your vampires, put loads of vampires out. Whatever your strategy is, everyone's going to do it a different way, and it all depends on where you start, because obviously you can't see your encounter hand before you place your initial location, which is not how the game should be done, but never mind, that's how digital implements it. So you just think, right, what is going to be the most irritating? Obviously, there are times where as Dracula you have to be defensive and go, I need to protect myself, I need to use fog here, I need to do this. But at the same time, it's like, what's the most irritating encounter for a hunter to land on here? This thing, right? And obviously you can't plan exactly who's going to land on what, but hopefully you can find things. And I've realized that too, where my initial way of playing as Dracula goes, I want to stay on land as long as possible because I want to not take loads of damage from sea, and then I can delay the game longer towards the 4th week where I'm on land, placing down encounters. But there are other times where, as Dracula, you have to go, no, I'm going to sea now, because if I stay on land, the hunters know I'm going to go to sea eventually, so they're going to just sit there in, a safe space like Munich or Marseille or wherever it is, in a good location for them to be in, and they're just going to keep supplying. And then the chance of them getting these good events, it only increases. I'll leave now, and I'm going to force them to make tough decisions. Do I move to try and cover? Or do I sit and supply? And that's when hunters will start making mistakes, and that's how I think. But that's a really difficult thing. I don't even know how you can teach that. It's not something it's taught, and I'm not saying I do it well. Clearly, I don't win all my Dracula games, so clearly I've got loads to learn still. But that's the way I approach it. I view it from a hunter perspective, right? I like how I play hunters. What would be the most irritating situation for me as a hunter player to be in? I'm going to do this. But then there are other hunter players who don't think like me, and they'll just do something completely different and go, oh, I didn't expect you to do that, and now my plan is foiled, or whatever. It just
I
depends.
think as well with the hunters, like you say, it depends what cards you've got in your hand, because that'll have a bearing on whether you need to supply or not.
Of course.
If you've got all the cards that you need, you get to the stage where you can get a glut of fantastic, and it's like feast or famine. You're like throwing away cards. Oh well, I don't need, or I can't hold on to two chartered cards, because if you haven't found Drac and you're not moving, you then run the risk of burning cards that as you say, they can only hold so many. And how does that work? Van Helsing can only trade and all the rest of it. So I think certainly you'll have your base strategy in place, and then it comes down to the cards, or what's going to, because the thing is, the cards are going to be what helps the hunters fight Dracula, and invariably deduct it as well. So if they don't have the right cards, you're then just relying on hunter to then go, right, so well, you've got to move, or does Mina passed about, so to speak, so that she can do psychic bonds on different countries, or because if you've exhausted your cards. So it's quite interesting. I mean, I'm probably, again, from mine, it's more looking at the Dracula stuff, because it's useful, kind of, especially now, again, because of the sort of meta where it's sit and burn and just go through the deck. It's not unheard of to go through the item deck for hunters twice in one game, if not more. So the whole, they've used up all their stakes or heavenly host. Well, in 2 days they're going to be a refreshed deck again, and they could be back at square one. So it's about getting maximum damage with as minimum effort, really, or as quick as you can before that. I think it kind of, the game's got so many nuances to it, as you said, Werecraft, that is that you can't just pick and say, well, if you do this, you've got a good chance of winning, because you've got the deck, which is its own, you've mentioned this in your video a few times, Scott, the deck's just being a prick against me, and it's like, it hates it, it's just not giving me the cards that I want or I need. And then it's like, well, you've then got to have a contingency where if you don't get the cards you need, how else can you keep playing the game?
Yep, and I think that's that aspect where you can sit as a hunter player, you can sit there all day and try and get that one card you need, or maybe you just can't afford to do that. You're just gonna have to move, and tough. You haven't got that card. Just try and win a different way, and that's just the way it has to go. And that's like, I must admit, towards the later part of the tournament, the games against Quincy and against Pizza Wizard stick out to me. I got a lot of really powerful cards early. But then on the flip side, like when I'm thinking about the earlier games, like there were quite a few games where I didn't get CG, and that, but you just know, okay, that card's not coming out for me this game. Tough. I can't really do much about it. I'm just going to try and work around it the best I can. Just again, it's all kind of about being adaptable. That's all you can really do. If you base your entire strategy based upon one single card, then that's gonna. Same with like fast horses. Like as much as I've made a video about fast horses and all that stuff. There are times where fast horses haven't come out for me. And I'm like, okay, I haven't got fast horses in Godalming, but Dracula started in the east, or I'm gonna have to find a different way to get there. Right, I'm gonna have to use this yellow rail line. I'm gonna have to use chartered carriage to get there, and whatever. You just have to sort of plan ahead for that, and that's where a lot of, if you can see that's going to happen before it happens, being proactive, it makes it so much easier. If you're having to react to everything, that's a potential problem. You see it, and I see it with Quincy sometimes when, because obviously another big resource, and I watch his videos. There are times where he's like, okay, I don't have fast horses on Godalming, so let's just get a chartered carriage over to him already. If he suddenly gets horses, then I can trade it back again. And like, right, instead of having to think in a head, you're not having to react to it. You're already planning something might happen like that. But it's such a multifaceted game. There's so many things intertwined. That's why we love it so much. It's great.
I agree. I have a few things I'd like to add to what you said, please.
Please do.
Do you have more you want to say?
No. On you
go. Yeah, I think that with respect to horses, I hear you about having to play the hand you're dealt, but on the other hand, I always plan on going through the item deck once. So I assume that I'll get the horses. So I always, it's not like I want to do fast horses, but I'm not going to use them. I'm good. I go into the game thinking I'm going to get the horses. And if I work on it, I will get horse economy up to an adequate level most of the time. And there really isn't any benefit to not doing that. True. So I'm going to do that every game. Not something I ever don't do.
Yeah,
well,
I
maybe
agree.
Sometimes I kind of sort of don't do it. But with events, like the movement cards, yeah, I've had games where I'm like, I really want to jump on him, but he's probably got fog, and I don't have forewarned yet. So, but on the other hand, I always supply. I hardly ever don't supply because I'm afraid of having to discard good events, because I think there are like maybe 30 or so events in the game that are really good and worth holding on to. Of those, some are better than others. So it's very rare that comes into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And so you as a hunter, I always am trying to supply more so that I can have renewed vigor and forewarned. Renewed vigor, forewarned, and something like a planned ambush on the lead hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I wanted to mention that. And obviously, Drac going to sea early is useful because it gives you time where you don't deal with encounters. And so what you were saying about going to sea now, I can hear what you're saying. It's difficult to judge, though, because if you're staying on land, you can maybe stick one more annoying encounter on a remote port like Cadiz or Athens, and that can cause them a lot of headaches.
That's true. No, that's definitely true. I'm not saying first week going to sea, but I mean unless you're doing something like southern Italy to the south to the east strategy. But I just mean when the point of the game where the hunters have kind of converged on your location, but obviously they're not overcommitting to your location. You got like 2 in your region trying to deal with encounters, and you got 2 hanging back a bit. That's the point where I'm like, do I stay? Do I go now? There are times as well, like I tried to do it I can't remember who I was playing against. No, I don't remember. I think it was against Quincy, maybe. It was Dracula, and I saw Spencer done it against me, where he went from Spain actually really early, but misdirected the port. And that's what I wanted to do, because I was something like, okay, I'm not putting down as many encounters, and I'm also going to lose an encounter from the misdirect. But if they don't have Money Trail, or they don't have Hypnosis, they're going to have to spend so much time trying to work out where I am. That's going to be really awkward. And then I think I messed it up. I didn't misdirect the port location, but never mind. So there are times where maybe, I'm not saying, I mean, obviously the name of the game in general is the more encounters on the trail, the better. And that's why we've talked about it, Roscoe, how Dark Call we're not a huge fan of, because that's one less encounter card that you have on the trail. Feed, same thing. There are times where you do have to feed, absolutely. But there are times where you don't want to do that, because then there's one, especially early on, there's one encounter fewer that the hunters have to deal with, and it's all a bit easier. It just depends.
Yeah, and that reminds me, sorry, I would like to interject something about encounters that we were talking about the decision of whether to let things mature versus not earlier, and I wanted to interject something about that, please.
Sure, go for it.
Of course, yeah.
What makes it so difficult as hunters is not only the loss of time, but the fact that I'm trying to think. There are 13 different encounters. 4 or so of them. 4 of them, of which there are 8 total, because there are 2 copies of each one, are ones that do damage, and those are fairly weak. So of the others, I assume that he's going to be throwing down the ones that are strong in different ways. And of those, a difficult question is it's not a simple matter of, if I go after this, I'll lose time, but I'll stop it from maturing, but that might or might not be good. Sometimes if you go after an encounter, you might actually be worse off in addition to the lost time. I'm thinking of the fighter vampires, of course, if you don't have a stake. But it's so complicated because if you do have a stake and it's an aristocratic or a hoax, then you've lost, and you use the stake, then yes, you don't lose a day action, but you've lost the stake, which can sometimes not be a problem at all. But it can also be like the disaster if you really need that stake to kill a fighter vampire with a rumor token on it that's next up. So, but for new players can get by with like automatically using stakes, and experienced players can sometimes overthink things and not use stakes when they really should, and then get into fights with fighter vampires at night, which can be quite dangerous, or even for the stronger hunters. So it's and then the other thing I wanted to mention is everybody knows about hoaxes and the power of fog, but desecrated soil is a particular an underappreciated Drac encounter, because you can stick it somewhere where they think a vampire would be like in a remote port, and if they don't have Heavenly Host, they can't deal with it, and it helps Drac for them to. If he does that, then they've lost the time going there. It's triggered, so he gets the encounter cycling.
Yep.
And if they don't have a Heavenly Host, he gets the health back. So in an optimal scenario, it's great for Drac. Even if they do get rid of it, he gets a significant value out of it because he's caused them to lose time, and he gets the encounter cycling.
Yeah, I agree. There's
very good point. Very good point. Yeah.
Very good card. I don't know, because we've done that Dracula encounter video, Rossco. I don't know if that came up. I probably would have done. I must admit, as a Dracula player, I get really disappointed if I don't get I mean, I'm not saying I have to have it initially, but if I've made it most of the way, 2/3 of the way through my encounter deck, and I haven't even got one copy of Desecrated Soul, I do get a bit disappointed going, oh, I need that health, or I want the encounters. It's such a useful card, very underrated. I think that's something we talked about in that video, Rossco, where, in general, I think the league, because it was so competitive and came out to very fine margins, it actually highlighted the powers of, I'm not saying that all the encounter cards are top tier, obviously not, but it actually highlights the power of some of those cards in terms of, like, if you let them mature, how devastating that can be later. And then, even if it's just a spy, but imagine that's the hunter's only weapon, and now they're going to have to waste time getting to a big, especially if it's in a small city, they have to go to another big city, so you're wasting a move, getting an item, then getting back on Dracula's trail. That could cause a lot of problems. It's
I think as well, yeah, you're right. It's a very good point, Werecraft, regarding that. I think from a hunter's point of view, if when it's revealed, and if they don't have Heavenly Host, if they were thinking of a card they would just let mature, that's probably one that they would, because if they're looking at Drac thinking, right, he's got 11 health, he doesn't really need, we're on his trail, they forget about it, and then by then it's a case of, are they going to send somebody all the way back? Whereas if in that meantime, before it matures, Drac's got into a battle with 2 hunters, for example, or he's had to go 3 seas and Rufus gets drawn the next day, then all of a sudden there's a case of, shit, I wish, you've just given him 3 health, then he feeds, now he's on 6 health plus whatever he had. All of a sudden it's a case of, that's the difference between, especially if he's just done a fight with a hunter, and then that matures, he gets 3 health back, he could be sitting on 10 health and the hunter's on 2, well, you just feed and kill a hunter, and all of a sudden, that's the whole, it's a very good point, because and I'm saying this because I think I've probably done it. It's one of those where I've thought, Desecrated, I'm not going to bother with it at the moment. It's not worth going all the way back just to and as you say, even just to get rid of it, you're giving Drac another 3 cards to choose, so he's burning through his deck, and it's going to be stronger cards for him. And it's a case of, do I want to go all the way back with Van Helsing, for example, who's got Heavenly Host? I'll let it go. There's been times that I've lost games because that extra 3 health is what helps Dracula escape combat or win. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that. Yeah, it's one of those that maybe from hunters, because it's not an immediate. But if you've got a rumor token on it, it's like, nah, it's not going to do anything bar give Dracula 3 health. But in the long run, as you guys have both said, your approach to it is clear the trail. Then that wouldn't come up in as much as the more experienced hunters. But I think newer hunters would maybe think of it and go, oh, I don't need to bother about that just now. And it's a case of, well, if you don't, you turn it into a layer, and then hunters jump on it again, and if they search because they don't check it's a layer, then all of a sudden Drac's getting 3 cards again. So, yeah, it's a very good point. It's a very good point, actually. I don't know where we put Desecrated Soil in the tier, but I don't think it was that high because of that.
Maybe. But it wasn't, like, at the bottom either. It'd be in the middle. But I think, again, a lot of these encounters, it all depends on the situation. They can be very powerful. Same with Bodyguards, a card that is stereotypically not rated very highly unless a hunter walks onto it with no weapon. But then if it matures, it just sits there, and even the Dracula player forgets about it. Then suddenly in combat, bam, 2 damage or 4 damage or whatever it is. It's like, oh, because imagine if a hunter walks onto a Heavenly Horse stake, I'm going to fight you. Oh no, I've got Bodyguards. And then that's a big problem. I was going to say with the Desecrated Soul, though, the first game in the final league I played against Mr. Green was a great example of that, where I put down 2, I had Desecrated Soul as a really late game. I put one in, I think, in Paris and one in 15, Clermont-Ferrand, and then I had to go to sea. Mr. Green cleared one of the one in 15, but he didn't go to clear it in Paris. And the interesting thing was then afterwards, I was asking about, why did you let that mature? And he said to me, oh, I didn't want, I mean, I thought it was because because I was going to Mediterranean, he was worried, if he went to Paris, he'd lose too many turns to get up there, then back down again. And he said, no, it's because I didn't want to give you more encounters. And I was like, well, the encounters wouldn't have made a sodding difference. I mean, it's just the way it turned out. But the encounters would have made no difference to the game. What actually won me the game was I had enough, because I think Rufus was in play. I needed that 3 health to get to the Ionian. If that thing hadn't matured, I would have had to land in the Turidian and he had CG. So it's just funny how just like that 3 health, it doesn't seem like much. It could be the difference between winning and losing. But then again, it's such a fine margin. When you look at it on the surface, it doesn't look much, but it can be really powerful. Yeah.
Pardon me. I agree entirely. Go ahead.
On you go, Werecraft. On you go.
I wanted to just interject a few things. Yeah, I agree entirely with that. The 3 health, the value of the 3 health varies.
Yeah.
I think it's much more useful in the end game, and as Dracula, you time the throwing down desecrated soil to benefit you the most. It's not great early because, like, if you throw it down as your first encounter, then if they don't draw a newspaper and it matures, then it's like it has pretty much, it's no better than feed.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
But when you really want to get as much value as possible out of your encounters. So with desecrated soil, you put it in an isolated place like, say, Cadiz. Maybe you put a rumor token on it so they think it's a vampire and they go to all the trouble to get somebody with a stake down there. And then maybe ideally they had a stake, but they didn't have Heavenly Host. Or even if they did, you still get some value out of it. And one final thing I'd like to say about it that you haven't mentioned yet is it reveals who has Heavenly. If they do have a Heavenly Host, it reveals that.
That is very true. Although
that helped me out. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, definitely. Late game, I agree. Obviously, in late game situations, you'd always reveal the Heavenly Host. You don't want Dracula getting that health back. Although I can't remember who I was playing against. It was definitely the final league. I can't remember who it was, but I had somebody went onto a desecrated soil somewhere in the east, didn't reveal Heavenly Host, and I was sitting there as Dracula because I knew they were going to jump onto me the next day. I'm like, I think you have Heavenly Host. I think it might have been it was on my location. I threw down desecrated soil, got encounters. They didn't reveal Heavenly Host. Like, I've got a sneaky suspicion you've got Heavenly Host, but you're just not showing me. In the end, they did. So there are some mind games you can play, but obviously late game, there's no reason why you wouldn't reveal the Heavenly Host. Unless you're about to go into battle, I suppose. It just depends on where it's placed, and if Dracula's found, it all just depends if it's current location or if it's 6 turns, it's about to mature off the trail or something.
Yeah, that's interesting because the hunters I've done that where I've not revealed Heavenly Host, and then if it's been in the vicinity, another hunter joins, and then I've done a transfer, or you do a trade that you abandon, but it just makes the other Dracula player think what you're trading now, what's going on, who's moving what, but you just trade, abandon, and you do the same with the Heavenly Host. Again, especially if they think, right, you haven't got one, and then you jump on it and they think, well, okay, if you haven't got a Heavenly Host, they might try and fang you. You can blitz them out the way and then throw down the Heavenly Host. So again, it's all down. And again, it's like people trying to hide Heavenly Host for CG. Well, if you've got CG, you're going to be pretty much fucked as Dracula regardless, because you're going to see how many Heavenly Hosts they have anyway. It's not really one of those that you have to keep secret and kind of like, well, let's keep all 3, because it's like, well, if you play, typically hunters, they're not going to play CG if they have got at least 2 Heavenly Hosts, if not the full quota. So it's one of those, but you're right. It's again depending on end game, and I mean, I think there's been times where Scot-sword you've said you've thrown desecrated, as a layer, just because it's like, well, get rid of it for there because you can get a better card in your hand, and then if they land on it, and again, if a hunter doesn't check the layers and they think what's this, and then search it, you get a free. You get the free 3 events, which is one side of the card. You don't get the health, but yeah, you're absolutely right, Werecraft. If you play it in the first week, your return's not really worth doing, and you're just going to turn it into a layer anyway, typically, unless you have done Dark Call and gone to sea, and you need that 3 health back. But if Drac players are doing that in the first week, they're not really going to last too long in the game, to be fair.
No, probably not. Wow. Also, I don't like it if I put down a vampire and then I put Desecrated Soil 1 or 2 turns after, and then it matures. I'm like, oh, I've lost my Desecrated Soil. Oh, damn. I feel a bit bad about it. Like, oh, that could have been kind of handy. They're going to walk on that. So yeah, it's something. It's all contextual. If you're as a Dracula player, if you're not desperate for health because there's no Rufus in play, you've done lots of land travel, so you're not you know, that sort of stuff, then you maybe don't need the 3 helps. It's not the end of the world. That I do is like, well, I'm really desperate for fog at this moment, so let's chuck Desecrated Soil into a layer because I might get the fog out with this next card, especially towards the bottom of the deck. But in other times, yeah, again, I think every card has a value. It's just trying to ascertain in that right moment what is the most valuable card. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone's gameplay is different. How they approach the game, they'll value cards more if they've got a certain way they play it. They'll play it differently, and you know, they'll value one card more than somebody else because they might decide, well, in my sort of theory or my gameplay, that card doesn't even, you know, I don't even work around that. Whereas other players might be, you're waiting for that card to come out based on that's, you know, part of the strategy is going to be when that comes out, we go down this route. But no, I think it's been very interesting. But look, I'm just looking at it there. I know Werecraft, you've got travel and things to do, and I was just.
I was going to say a half an hour chat. A half an hour chat. It's slightly extended somewhat. That's just classic Rossco and Scot-sword stuff. That's been really good. Really good.
It's been great that both of you came on. I think this will be very interesting for all, not just those involved in the tournament, but all the players of the Discord. You know, these are the 2 guys, everyone that you need to go after. These are the ones that have got a target on their backs because they deserve the wins they got and the gameplay they did. You know, you played very well, and again, it's just been testament to the tournament, because again, what you didn't want, and with most sporting events, you know, if you've got the top 2 that are far ahead, people lose interest because it's like, oh right, well they've won it. What, you know, everyone's just battling, but because it was close, pretty much down to the last week or so.
Absolutely.
And you 2 were fighting it, and it was a case of, you know, it brought on the things like, okay, well, Scot-sword's going to try and be impartial, but he wants your opponent, Werecraft, to win because it gets him closer to you. It just worked really well. So, on behalf of the beginning, on behalf of the community, thank you both, and to everyone that played the tournament. But yeah, you 2 are well deserved in the positions. You played an absolute blinder throughout the whole tournament. So congratulations to you both.
Not very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Very kind.
Scot-sword.
Very kind. I'd just like to say, as the organizer, like, a huge thanks to everybody who participated in the tournament. This wouldn't have happened. It went beyond my wildest dreams when I first sort of came up with the idea, and I was like, who could play? Or maybe there might be like half a dozen of us maybe that could play. And then suddenly, you know, when the registration date passed, I saw 21 enters. In the end, it was only 20 because of a couple of dropouts. But I was just like, what's going on here? And having to, it just went beyond my greatest expectations, and some little bumps along the way. But you know, it's the first tournament. I'm not surprised that was the case. But no, it went incredibly well. I'm really happy. Just in general, not as a competitor, obviously I won it, but just as an organizer, it went very well. I'm very happy with everything. I was going to say, yeah, now you said I've got a target on my back. Well, now it's with this video I'm going to announce my retirement from Fury of Dracula. So yeah, it's just Werecraft's the only one you have to go for now. I'm joking. I'll be here. I've still got to try and get a good win rate against Werecraft, so don't worry, I'll be sticking around for quite a bit longer.
No, well, I'll let you do the outro. Scott sort of I commandeered the beginning of the channel, so I'll let you do that. But
is there any?
Listen,
anything
else, Werecraft?
Yes. Any last words, Werecraft?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words, Rossco. I'm honored to have participated in the tournament with you and been interviewed by you. You were sort of my sensei as well, way back in January when we played our first games. You were very friendly, always been friendly. And I'd like to make one final mention about just shifting gears, just kind of shoehorn this in. When we were talking about Desecrated Soil, this past October, I watched Nosferatu, the first vampire film, which is basically the Dracula story, the silent film. And in that, it mentions the piece of lore that Desecrated Soil is from the graveyards of children who died during the Black Death. And so that really made me think, and yeah, it should be a powerful card.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I don't know if you've seen, not only have I changed, I kept my identity and my gender, but I've changed my name on it, but I've also changed my avatar. And fun if you say that, it's the Nosferatu, because I watched Nosferatu last week. So many times. But I thought, you know what? It was on the stream set I used. I thought, you know, I've not watched that in literally years. I thought I'm going to put it back on again. It's a great little film. It's and yeah, it's funny. It's quite poignant as you said that there when they mentioned the desecrated soil because of the children. It's like, yeah. Actually, you can see why it does what it should. But yeah. Scot-sword. I'm trying to get him to watch it. You've got to watch Nosferatu, mate. But the original, not the remake.
Okay, cool. It is added to my list. Like my extensive list.
Time. I just want to make an additional comment about Nosferatu, please, and this kind of ties into to Bram Stoker's Dracula as well. There's a lot to say about this topic, and I can only kind of scratch the tip of the iceberg here. But I was troubled watching Nosferatu because it was made in the 20s. I was troubled by how the ways that I thought that it to a certain extent was linked with Nazism, the way the vampire was depicted as having features like a stereotypical Jew, doing things that were associated with anti-Semitic. And yet I found out it was made by a gay man who was a liberal. And so that got me thinking about how he may have thought that he had to conform with certain ideas which were prevalent in the culture at the time. But yeah, so there's a lot of different ways of looking at vampirism, and my views are somewhat different than Quincy's, but I respect his views at the same time.
And I think, yeah, no, if you were saying that as well, you're absolutely right, because I remember looking back on it with Max Schreck when he did the role, and there was a rare. I think it may have been in his biography or somewhere I was reading about that there, but his father actually died when he was young before he went into acting, and had been kind of against him doing that and all the rest of it beforehand. So when he got this role, as you say, it was very much kind of anti-Semitic and the nuances behind it. And again, purely because it was the time the world was in. A lot of if you look at things like on an older scale, you look at Lord of the Rings was written by Tolkien based on the same time with the wars and kind of what the world was going through and how it can be portrayed and written without blatantly, using this as the time or these targets and things. But it was very much I think very much underrated. And again, it's one of those that people see they assume it's, you talk to people about, obviously, his name's Orlaf. Orlag in it is not even Dracula, as you'd imagine, like with Nosferatu. But when you talk to people about your favourite Dracula movie or whatever, and it's either, Christopher Lee, the Hammer ones, or this and that, and very few that I speak to is Nosferatu. I'm like, you need to go and watch. Is that? Yeah, that's a silent movie, and it's almost like they're put off. It's like, well, this is where it kind of stemmed from, and as you say, there's so many nuances, Werecraft, to it, that it isn't just. It's like the Gary Oldman one where it's very much trying to romanticize and glamorize the vampire as being, this, and then you bring in the Lost Boys in the 80s where it was almost cool to be a vampire. This, where it all stemmed from, it's kind of, this is what it's all about. And again, it just comes down to people's views on where they sit on various lines for that. Certainly Fury of Dracula, Dracula's, my character, and reading the book was always, there's a lot of layers to it. I think more than just this is what he does is evil. It's like, well, you've got to. Again, depends how you approach it. It depends how you approach it, and you can read into it or you can't, whatever you want to do. But no, it was just funny there that it was on my mind because I just watched it last week and it was, a lot of things in there and a timely time for us to do the interview, considering you've just completed the tournament and then you've watched that as well. So yeah, that should be. If you want it, Scot-sword, I'll send you a link to the Nosferatu and you can watch it.
Oh,
that's
go
your
for
homework
it.
For the weekend.
Well, I've got double homework then because I started reading the book and I need to just.
Done.
Thank you. I'm not that uncultured. I've picked up a book once in a while. That's been like as like so interesting. Like I come in from this like purely just from a board game perspective. Like, I saw it on tabletop. This looks fun. I like all these game mechanics, and then there's like all this like other stuff. There's like the whole cloud around it of like lore and all that sort of thing, which I'm just like I'm completely out of my depth with it. But I started reading the book. I need to finish the book, and yeah, if there's a good recommendation for vampire film, send it my way, and I should take advantage of my holidays and actually consume this stuff. And well,
oh, absolutely.
Well, thank you for both of you. Thank you for doing the interview, Roscoe. Thank you for both of you for taking up your time to have this little conversation. I mean, I say little conversation. This is
No, yeah, no. Thank you both. No, it's good to get insight into your. It's always good to get insight into how champions' minds work, and both winners in my eyes.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Thank you for listening to this, and we'll see you in the next video very soon. Bye bye.